the good thing that happened is a lot of the early employees that worked in Zoho or Freshworks understood the power and ability of building global products at scale from India, right? You have lower cost of engineering, lower cost of sales and marketing. You have a huge talent pool of people who understand specific vertical related problems coming from the services point that I earlier mentioned. Then you had an ability to keep customer experience and customer success at the forefront of the way you build products, kind of thing, right? So what started happening is the early product managers or engineers of these companies started branching out and started building their own companies as a result, kind of thing. So you almost started seeing a flywheel that really accelerated from 2015. So if you are building something for the enterprise, they would typically want to go in for a slightly longer contract, because enterprise, it's hard for them to use a particular software, then replace it with something else, then again integrate it, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas a consumer buying behavior is completely different. The stickiness, so you might, as a consumer, buy something today, but tomorrow you might find something else attractive and you can switch it. No one is going to ask you why you didn't buy this tomorrow, kind of thing, right? But the enterprise or even the mid-market or even SMB, in some cases, the contracts are much longer. So it's hard to move out of contracts easily, kind of thing, right? So stickiness is longer, kind of. So you have predictability of revenue. A lot of these things, and to your point, it's happened because of free access to information, easy access to information, learning from each other through communities, sharing information more freely, all those kinds of things, right? Vibrant open source community in India, kind of thing, right? So India had the second largest contributor to GitHub globally, kind of thing, after US, right? And this was unheard of even 5 years back, kind of thing, right? So the speed at which the transformation has happened is phenomenal, I would say. So I remember when I was in my engineering college, I was doing computer science, and I didn't get access to a computer at home till my last year of college, kind of thing, right? So I used to go to labs and sit there and do my assignments and stuff. And just fast forward maybe just 5 or even 7 years later, you see kids, like you said, programming below 10, kind of thing, right? Starting to learn programming. So there's been a massive shift in the way technology is being adopted, and especially in India. I think, given the young nature of our demographics, it's acted as a huge tailwind to drive this digital penetration and adoption across the country.
Hi everyone. In this episode, I get a chance to speak with Ravi Rajamony. Ravi is Vice President at March Capital. This is a very in-depth episode about SaaS. So if you're a founder looking to build something in SaaS, or if you're just curious about SaaS, this episode will probably be helpful for you. We covered a lot of ground. We discuss a little bit of history, the importance of getting product market fit, what kind of different segments you can sell to as a B2B company, hiring, funding, and much more. One disclaimer is that this was recorded in 2023, but I've edited it so that it remains timeless. I had a great time recording this, and I hope you guys find it really useful. With that, my friends, Ravi Rajamony.
Before we get to today and today's SaaS market and how the industry might be performing or the state of the industry today, should we maybe set up a few things as to how we came to be here today?
Sure. So I think, I look at it in 3 parts. The first part being from, say, the decade between 90s to 2000s, when a lot of IT services companies, TCS, Infosys, really started scaling up, and a lot of talent started building up, especially around ability to understand what large enterprises globally need in terms of software and automation requirements, and then bring that talent, or immerse that talent along with what was coming up from the colleges and companies that were emerging out of India, right? So that was, I would say, the first wave. The second wave between 2000 to 2010, like the first decade of the century, was essentially around large, big technology companies, Microsoft, Google, Adobe, all establishing huge R&D centers in India. So that drove the talent aspect and upskilling aspect for the larger population in India, especially the young graduates that were coming out of college, to get exposed to large-scale technology problems, large-scale business problems, and how do you think about building something meaningful and long-lasting, kind of thing, right? And then obviously the last decade, so from 2010 to 2020, we started seeing more emergence of SaaS companies like Zoho, like Freshworks, like iCertis or Innovisor, HighRadius, and many more, kind of thing, right? All of these started emerging. You had this talent pool that got created. You had fundamental understanding of people on how to build software products at scale. And when those two came together with access to high tech talent, you started seeing companies building out at scale.
One thing I completely forgot, or it didn't really, I don't know if I didn't pay much attention to it, or because of my limited knowledge, my mind didn't go there. When you mentioned 90s and how Infosys and TCS were already founded, like for me, like the internet era for India at least starts in the mid 2005ish.
Correct.
That area. Like I feel like before that was all like US companies or like global companies, which were by global I mean US or Europe dominated like companies. But India did get like a decent start even back then, right?
Yes, that's right.
But then I feel like it's been like sort of a lost decade or two. Is that fair to say?
I think more than lost decade, I would say that things have picked up slowly. It's not like we have missed out, but obviously it helps when you're building software in US when the market itself is there, kind of thing, right? So companies and enterprises are willing to pay for the software you build. So when you're building out of India, the challenge of adoption in India has been slow, at least in terms of software buying. So when you look at when you're building software from here, but you're selling it to the US and Europe, that ramp up has taken a bit of time, kind of thing, right? And also there are not many use cases. So when you have references, when you have 1 or 2 companies really building something, you can learn easily out of it. So when you look at US, there were already reference points that are established in 90s or even before that, that people could just leverage, learn from, and just build on top kind of thing, right? Whereas it took a while from the early 90s, like you said, to the emergence of internet and digitization across wide population to gradually kind of build up. So I would say we lost a lot of time, but I think it's a ramp up has been slow.
So just to state that in the sense, like, do you ascribe the slowness mostly for infrastructure reason where like India itself, like one is did not have like digital connectivity, and that's why even if there was like Infosys and TCS, it did not spread like wildfire, or maybe people did not really understand the value or the potential of this technology. Just was the infrastructure the bottleneck?
That could be one aspect of it, but I would also say there are multiple reasons. So I think if you look at the ability or the rate at which technology has proliferated has happened in the last 20 years. Across the world kind of thing, right? Before that, predominantly there were one or two markets, especially US, which was dominating kind of thing. But then, as younger generations or demographics plays a part, they started getting exposed to technology much earlier, maybe even first year of college itself kind of thing, right? Then the understanding of, okay, what does it take for me to become a successful software developer, that know-how, talking to people in the industry, talking to people who have solved such problems at large scale, all that along with, digital adoption has been a step-by-step process, I would say. So I think it's a natural evolution. You can always say, things could have happened faster in retrospect, but I think each pillar or each time horizon has added its value. For the services foundation that was laid in 90s and early 2000s, that helped people develop domain depth, vertical experience, understanding in retail what specific use case does a customer actually look at, or in healthcare, what are some problems. So that domain foundation takes time. It doesn't happen overnight kind of thing, right? Now, understanding on how to build products, that happened when large technology companies started coming in kind of thing, right? So it's a multi-step journey, I would say. So, sure, it could have happened 5 or 10 years earlier if everything worked out well. But I still think whatever experience has had, like people have gained over the years, is all useful to kind of build over the next 10 years, 20 years. Kind of.
You know how you were saying that people started getting exposed to technology earlier, and you mentioned first year of college.
That stuff is late.
Nowadays, I see people on Twitter who are like 14-year-olds.
That's correct.
Who are like tweeting all this React.js and deep learning and all that.
That's right. So it's a funny story. So I remember when I was in my engineering college, I was doing computer science, and I didn't get access to a computer at home till my last year of college kind of thing, right? So I used to go to labs and sit there and do my assignments and stuff. And just fast forward maybe just 5 or even 7 years later, you see kids, like you said, programming below 10 kind of thing, right? Starting to learn programming. So, there's been a massive shift in the way technology is being adopted. And especially in India, I think, given the young nature of our demographics, it's acted as a huge tailwind to drive this digital penetration and adoption across the country.
Yeah. And these online communities are also very strong. Like, I mean, even if... if you have some idea that you want to become a front-end developer, or let's say you want to become a deep learning engineer, all you need is like one community or like one GitHub page or one Twitter page, and you're just filled with resources and you can...
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the rate at which software is being developed today to what it was even 5 to 7 years back, I would say it's at least 5 to 10 times better in terms of just the speed, the ability to build foolproof software, ability to build scalable software, a lot of these things. And to your point, it's happened because of free access to information, easy access to information, learning from each other through communities, sharing information more freely, all those kinds of things, right? Vibrant open source community in India kind of thing, right? So, I mean, just as of last month, I read somewhere that India had the second largest contributor to GitHub globally kind of thing after US, right? And this was unheard of even 5 years back kind of thing, right? So the speed at which the transformation has happened is phenomenal, I would say.
When you mentioned examples of like Google or Microsoft maybe setting up offices in India, I kind of, as an average person, I feel like that is still like, they have, it's like their know-how, and it's mostly like maybe some backend stuff or some of the primitive stuff that they probably outsource to India. When would you think that Indians themselves start developing that this is really a huge market? Obviously, we touched on like it was already there in the 90s with Infosys, but I kind of view that as in a smaller scale. Like, is there a point, would you say, that where you think that the opportunity and maybe even the funding and maybe the climate and the adoption also was starting to take off really well? Is there a time like that? Or?
I would say, I think right around the global financial crisis, I think when it really started hitting off, I would say kind of thing, right? Before that, we had strong Indian consumer startup use cases and stories that were coming out of India. But this concept of products being built out of India for the world was a relatively unknown phenomenon kind of thing, right? So I would say Zoho was the starting point. And then, Girish started with Freshworks, and then start really into 2010 onwards kind of thing, really ramped it up kind of thing, right? And the good thing that happened is a lot of the early employees that worked in Zoho or Freshworks understood the power and ability of building global products at scale from India, right? You have lower cost of engineering, lower cost of sales and marketing. You have a huge talent pool of people who understand specific vertical related problems coming from the services point that I earlier mentioned. Then you had an ability to keep customer experience and customer success at the forefront of the way you build products kind of thing, right? So what started happening is the early product managers or engineers of these companies started branching out and started building their own companies as a result kind of thing. So you almost started seeing a flywheel that really accelerated from 2015. So I would say 2008 to 2015 was more the incubation kind of period. And 2015 onwards, it's been like on a rapid growth trajectory kind of thing, right? So now to the tune, you have more than 20 SaaS unicorns out of India in a very short period of time, right? And not just that, you have more than 3,000 SaaS companies built out of India in the last 5-6 years kind of thing, right? So this rate of growth has been extremely rapid. And there was a recent report published by McKinsey on the rate of growth of Indian SaaS building for the world. They're estimating that to be around $50 to $70 billion of ARR or revenue by 2030 from a base of about 10 or 12 billion till last year kind of thing, right? So very quick adoption and growth, and that almost creating $500 billion of enterprise value globally kind of thing, right? So we are talking about really massive numbers and massive impact in a very compressed timeline, I would say.
So at this point, I think I want to take a step back.
Yeah.
In the sense that I'll share a few assumptions and maybe you can correct them and maybe you can clarify them as well. So first of all, is it fair to say that India is building for the word thread?
Yeah.
Did it start off like that, where in the sense that the SaaS companies that were started in India, instead of focusing on the domestic market, they kind of skipped that part and just what does the US want, or what do the Western countries want?
Correct.
So is that thread? And even maybe taking another step back, if you can maybe set a few things up with like what is a SaaS company? What do they do?
Sure.
If you can maybe set that up.
Sure. So essentially, SaaS or software as a service is a way of, so let's take a step back. Originally companies used to have licenses, right? The way the software companies used to make money is they would build a software, ship it out, get paid on a license basis. It could be Oracle, it could be Microsoft Office from your early days.
So let me just see if I understood that. So by license you mean I'm making a software and you're like, if I give you a copy, you're just paying me
Correct.
a lump sum.
Exactly. Whatever the charges for one-time payment, you're paying it kind of thing. Then there is some maintenance service charges that you'll pay on an annual basis and so on and so forth kind of thing, right? Now that whole model shifted when there is software as a subscription started coming up kind of thing, right? So SaaS, typically the model works in a way where, let's say you're a software company, you're building some product and I'm an enterprise customer. I'm buying the product from you. I pay you based on, let's say I have 5 users that will use that software. So based on the number of users or seats, I pay you a particular rate. It will be per month or per year, depending on the contract kind of thing, right? And I'll have this contract with you either on an annual basis or a semi-annual or a biannual or once for 3 years or so on and so forth, right? So I am paying you for a specific period of time for the product, along with some support and some services that I'm supposed to get along with that kind of thing, right? So that's a subscription kind of model. Now the advantage of this is obviously, if you have a longer term contract, you have the customer locked in for a specific period of time kind of thing, right? Along with that, you get services, you can, and as your company scales and grows, you can expand kind of thing, right? So you as a developer of a SaaS product can also grow along with as the end customer grows kind of thing, right? And along, I would also add like this cloud adoption has really accelerated the need and requirement for software as a service products kind of thing, right? So basically what does that mean, right? So I used to have certain pieces of software that were residing in my own environment. We call it as on-premise environment. And then now with Microsoft, Google, Amazon building large scale public cloud instances, I don't need to kind of host all of that information in my environment kind of thing, right? So I would save costs on data centers, managing the information, security, building everything in-house kind of thing. I can use AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure kind of thing, right? So based on that, all the software that needs are also shifting rapidly to a subscription model, right? Because it ties in nicely with the way cloud gets priced kind of.
So I'm so sorry.
Sure.
Was the business model like in part an effect of the cloud or the cloud business, or was it?
It was much before, but the cloud business has accelerated the rate at which SaaS products have been adopted by enterprises globally. Kind of thing, right? So the shift from on-prem software or hosted software to cloud software has accelerated the rate at which companies are building SaaS products. Kind of. That would be the main reason. And combined with that, the pandemic, where the need for remote workforce, distributed workforce, people working from anywhere, ability to onboard from anywhere, all those kinds of things, you need products that can be, hosted anywhere and kind of, can be adopted very quickly or, from remote locations kind of thing, right? So all those factors have caused this rapid growth of digital transformation and shift towards SaaS pricing models and so on and so forth. Even within SaaS, I would say the user-based pricing is just one way of pricing, right? There's also consumption-based pricing where a lot of companies are now, charging enterprises depending on usage. So if you use, say, X dollars per year, then you have to pay the underlying SaaS software player that amount or whatever the amount is kind of thing, right? So that's another new way of pricing that's emerging kind of thing out of this. So a lot of innovative ways of, ability to grow along with your customer. So the customer is also not tied into paying for something that he or she is not using, right? So the usage-based pricing is driving that. Subscription-based pricing obviously has already been in place for a few years. So a lot of innovative pricing models are coming out because of rapid SaaS adoption as well.
When I think about like SaaS subscription models, like as a consumer, Netflix sounds close to like, I feel like I'm like I pay like it may not be quarterly but monthly.
Yes, that's right. So you are paid onto the contract kind of thing, right? So and you are a regular subscriber. So the way Netflix makes money is obviously subscription is one way, but obviously they have their own content production which is on the back end kind of thing, right? Then earlier they used to kind of get content from other providers kind of thing, and they used to pay them money kind of thing, right? So I mean that's one clear use case I would say kind of thing, right? But another use case in a business setting, for example, right? Let's say you are retail customer kind of thing, let's say P&G, Procter & Gamble kind of thing, right? And you want to understand what are particular customers buying kind of thing, right? And based on that, you will decide what products do you prioritize, what products do you need to spend more marketing dollars on, what products do you want to deprioritize, so on and so forth. So you have SaaS softwares that will, read and observe and understand consumer behavior patterns, buying patterns kind of thing. It could be online models, it could be offline models. And then based on those models, they will provide recommendations to P&G. Hey, this is how you should, prioritize, let's say your hand soap, for example, right? Or you need to prioritize so-and-so product in such a demographic, in such a location, in such a market kind of thing, right? So it goes really granular in terms of, and this ability to provide this level of analytics and insight is very powerful for somebody like P&G who's always looking at, how am I getting maximum ROI from the marketing dollars I'm investing, from the sales dollars I'm investing kind of thing, right? So that's a very clear business B2B use case, I would say, from a analytics SaaS software point of view.
So at this point, I have a very basic question.
Yeah.
When I think about SaaS, even though I gave you the Netflix example, broadly I feel SaaS is B2B. Like, is that fair, or does it have a B2C component?
Yeah,
as well?
I think, this is always a debatable question, but there is B2B and there's B2B2C.
B2B2C, is
C,
it?
and then there's B2C. So I think SaaS plays a much broader and prominent role in B2B and B2B2C. In B2C, obviously, you are more tied down to different kinds of pricing models where it's more about what a consumer is willing to pay for a particular product kind of thing, right? So it could be a direct channel, it could be an indirect channel, so on and so forth kind of thing. But the maximum use case and value you can see is in the first two scenarios, I would say.
Can you think of an example of B2B2C?
So, the retail example I said is a B2B2C,
Okay.
or even a healthcare example you can take where, you are providing a particular piece of software to, let's say, a healthcare provider or a hospital, for example, and a doctor or a nurse is the end user of that kind of thing, right? Where they are getting some information, or a patient is an end consumer of the software kind of thing, right? So that could be another example where the software is being built for a business, but the end user is actually being a consumer kind of thing.
Also, another digression is are like B2B businesses more like broadly profitable or more like revenue generating than B2C?
So there are two ways to look at it. I think there is more predictability, I would say, especially once you reach a certain scale, because you know which customer segment you're targeting. If you're building something for the enterprise, they would typically want to go in for a slightly longer contract, because enterprise, it's hard for them to use a particular software, then replace it with something else, then again integrate it, and so on and so forth, right? Whereas a consumer buying behavior is completely different. The stickiness, so you might, as a consumer, buy something today, but tomorrow you might find something else attractive and you can switch. No one is going to ask you why you didn't buy this tomorrow kind of thing, right? But the enterprise or even the mid-market or even SMB in some cases, the contracts are much longer. So it's hard to move out of contracts easily kind of thing, right? So stickiness is longer kind of. So you have predictability of revenue.
I actually have one example. I don't know if it's a SaaS example, but apparently it took Amazon 13 years to switch from Oracle database to like their own native AWS. And so even though it's their own service, it took them like 13 years.
Correct.
So,
in fact, AWS came out because Amazon had such a big need of the amount of data that they were processing through e-commerce, and they felt, hey, AWS would be our this is something that will solve our own internal problem. And once they started to realize its potential, they thought, the world will need it kind of thing, right? So they were the first movers in terms of at least commercializing it kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. The amount of time it takes to move any piece of software from one environment to the other, or even replace, especially if it is integrated, deeply within the enterprise, it's a lot of challenges kind of thing, right? The incremental value will be there, but you need to go through a step-by-step process, go through the pain points and then get to that end state.
So to circle back to the aspect of Indians building, so did they move? So if the assumption is true that they skipped the domestic market and started developing to the US market in the beginning, why did they do that? And what is the logic behind that?
So I think the first reason is the rate at which software is adopted in a US market is much faster or higher than what it was in the Indian market kind of thing, right? Obviously, US is a much bigger software market just from a quantum size as well as compared to the Indian market as well, whether it's small to mid-sized business or all the way up to an enterprise kind of thing, right? So the ability for you to get customer feedback, built into your product roadmap is much easier and faster when you build for the US market, right? So because people are willing to pay for software, people are willing to kind of see value in what you're building, and it's not so much about price, but it's almost about what value and what return you're able to get them kind of thing, right? So those were the natural reasons why people started first with the US market. Larger market, ability to pay, easy to get customer feedback rolled into your product, and then obviously you start with US, then you go to Europe or vice versa or other specific markets. Then you can build in those functionalities, and then if at all you want to build for enterprises within the India market, you can then adopt and pivot and those kind of things. But generally we have seen that building something for India and then scaling it out has not worked successfully kind of thing, right? Because it's a very unique market. India is a very unique market as compared to, it's a developing market. The customer needs and requirements are completely different. The preferences has been traditionally to build something on your own versus buying software from outside kind of thing, right? So all those challenges are reasons why people have preferred to kind of sell there. And then eventually as they go global, they'll kind of come to India as well.
So you kind of touched on this in the sense that one of the reasons like Indians or maybe even like global players prefer the US market might be because of like larger market obviously, and feedback might be continuous. Are you like surprised that like US is such a huge market, and in the sense that I never get to hear like we're building for US and we're building for, I don't know, Germany. It
Yeah.
never pops up. Like, it's like US.
Yeah.
It's always. Is it that because, like as you mentioned, the reasons, large market,
Yeah.
and, or is there anything to it that there's this one country, even China? I mean, nobody exports,
Correct.
even though it's a large market, and I think take adoption is relatively more than India at least.
Correct.
So are you surprised by that US dominates?
I would say surprised because US has been a large economy for a while kind of thing now, right? And it's been on the forefront of technology and innovation also for a while kind of.
I'm so sorry, but
yeah.
but even Europe,
True,
Europe is
true, yeah.
Even though they have the money and they seem like somewhat like similar to the US in culture and
That's
all
right.
that, but
That's
in terms of
correct.
like software spending,
Correct.
nobody talks
So
about.
there the interesting thing is, and when I speak to founders, there are a couple of observations kind of thing, right? One is if you look at Europe as a whole, then obviously it's a big kind of market kind of thing, right? But you can't because there's Germany, different language, different culture, different needs for software as compared to say I don't know Portugal or Spain kind of thing, right? So even within Western Europe itself, there are a lot of localization even in software in terms of software needs, in terms of what people are looking for kind of thing, right? And there's also a lot of homegrown companies that have traditionally been in play with these large enterprises for a while kind of thing, right? So it's harder, I mean the rate at which they buy software is slower, or even adopt software, more than buy, it's more rate at which they adopt software has been slower to a US enterprise kind of thing, right? So I think those are a couple of reasons, right? That much more fragmented kind of market, more localized, whereas US, you can you can sell in California, you can potentially sell in New York as well kind of thing. Right?
From the outside, Europe looks similar, but when you
Drill down,
it's very
there are
different.
very specific nuances on each country. Within each country itself, there are different local requirements in terms of which kind of businesses you're serving to. If it's a telco, it's a different thing. It's a financial service. So if you're especially building horizontal SaaS products, it's harder because you don't have that scale of enterprises or access to enterprises that you get in the US.
Understood. Is that an issue though, in the sense, not in the like when we are building for? So if I was to start a company, a SaaS company, maybe my first thought would be like, how do I build this for a US market, or how do I build this for a US company? Maybe enterprise company, you can say. Is that a bottleneck though, in the sense that first of all you're not in that country, and maybe understanding how the US market works? Is it? I would assume that maybe someone who's in the US is better suited to build like a US a product that is suited to the US market. Is that fair? Does that become like a bottleneck?
Yeah, great question. So I think we have to look at the market and segment it into 3 different layers kind of thing, right? Let's take the enterprise one that you mentioned first, right? So this typically is harder to crack if you're sitting in India kind of thing, right? Because it's a more longer sales cycle, is larger contracts, but you need to have that relationship with the customer where you need to spend time. You need to have a dedicated solution architect who understands what the customer problem is. How do you build a solution that's specific to the problem? So you need a lot of in-person interaction kind of thing, right? So a founder starting off from here, trying to crack the enterprise, it'll be harder kind of thing, right? So what has worked well from India is you build for the small to mid-sized businesses, US, Europe, globally kind of thing, right? Especially markets that are willing to spend kind of thing, right? So like Zoho Freshworks was the first examples that I mentioned kind of thing, right? But then you can build playbooks around them where you are accessing customers just hear about you through marketing channels, Google search, events, networking seminars, conferences, those kinds of things. So you don't have to have a field sales team in person, at least initially kind of thing, right? And once you reach certain scale, it could be $1 million, it could be $3 million of revenue or ARR kind of thing, then you are ready to at least kind of go there, establish a presence and gradually try moving up market kind of thing, right? So I think, so if you look at different customer segments, the playbook has been established for the small to mid-sized businesses and mid-market to some extent, that you can potentially start off from here itself, build the product, do events, do marketing so that you start getting some traction. And then once you reach certain scale, you hire somebody in the US or the founder moves to the US and then you kind of scale it up kind of thing, right? Directly going to enterprise hasn't worked kind of thing for obvious reasons. I mean, it's not just India specific, it's for any company, SaaS company building anywhere in the world. You have to be in the largest market kind of thing, right? So that's how I would look at the different segments of customers and what it takes to be successful kind of thing.
Understood. Like just to be clear, like if you can, when you say small, mid-size, and enterprise, like what do you talk like?
So number of employees. So a small to mid-sized business could be anywhere between say 1 to 100 employees, or maybe 1 to 200 employees, right? A mid-sized business could be between 200 to 1,000 employees, say, and then a large enterprise could be anywhere about 1,000. So everybody will have a different definition because in each, if you're building a vertical specific SaaS software, the definitions could be different. But broad contours could be around these kinds of things, right? So if you're looking at the top Fortune 500 companies in the world and you're building software for them, they are your enterprises kind of thing, right? If you're building something for startups and you're looking to scale along with them, startups or small businesses who have 10 people, 5 people, so on and so forth, but they're running like $3 million, $5 million, $10 million of book kind of thing, they could be your small to mid-sized businesses. So
like when I think of enterprises, I think of like Microsoft.
That's right. Yeah.
Like extremely large companies.
Correct. Yeah. So your Fortune 500 could be categorized as enterprises.
Correct. Is it still the case even today, after almost 15 years now? Is it still the case that even today when somebody starts a company, the first priority is, let's say, the US market, or has that shifted a little bit at all?
I think there's a mix. I would say predominant majority is still focused on building for the US market kind of thing. But there are companies over the last, I would say even 10 years, that are building for India as well kind of thing, right? They could be around building accounting software for small to mid-sized businesses, for example, within India kind of thing, right? right? So that could be one example. Or people building specific SaaS solution for the financial services vertical, which has seen tremendous transformation in India, kind of thing, right? It could be credit analysis, risk modeling. It could be around KYC or anti-money laundering checks, so on and so forth, right? So there are very specific use cases for which software is being built for India as well, which has seen a good amount of growth. In fact, if you look at the SaaS adoption from a consumption point of view, like a market consumption point of view, India is the fastest growing SaaS market from a usage point of view as well. Understand the base is still very low as compared to US, but India's SaaS market is projected to grow from 4 to 5 billion that is there today roughly at about 30-35% over the next decade, kind of.
And US is that?
US is around about 10 times that, and it's growing at about 20 to 25% kind of thing, right?
So about, it's $100 billion market, is it?
So about 40 to 50 right now, but yeah, eventually it'll get to that in about 10 years, kind of thing, right? So that's the quantum we are talking about. So the market is still very small, right? But there are use cases that are emerging and people are building some software. I think also there is your large enterprises still buy good quality software, kind of thing, right? Whether it's the large Tata Group or Mahindra Group or Reliance and so on and so forth, right? They will still look to buy things that will add tremendous value to their own business, kind of thing. The challenge is how do you get the small and mid-sized businesses to think that the software is actually adding value versus it being a cost, kind of thing. And that mindset shift is happening. It'll take some time, but it's starting to happen, I would say. As the economy grows, as the country grows, as more businesses have more spending power, it's a natural way of adoption will also increase.
If I understood correctly, or at least what I was able to capture was the spending power in India. The spending power in India is not like as much, or it's not there yet.
Yes, that's right.
And that's why it's kind of difficult to build for the Indian market. Is that fair?
That's right. That's one main reason. And traditionally we have not been, at least in the small to mid-sized businesses, we have not been used to buying software. We are used to building something ourselves or
businesses in India.
Businesses in India, yeah. So that mindset shift also has to happen. That as my business is growing, so let's say I'm operating a small store and I'm looking to scale it up to 5 other locations, for example, right? Now there are specific pieces of software that will add tremendous value as I scale that, kind of thing. Now I need to understand what money I'm investing in the software. It might be slightly larger upfront, but I would get value for it over a period of time, right? So that mindset shift is what is taking some time, kind of thing, along with the spending power, I would say, kind of thing.
Is it also like, I mean, I don't know how to put this like diplomatically, like, do Indians hesitate to spend in general? Like, I mean, like, why should I spend on this? This is useless to me. Is that attitude like prevalent, or?
I don't think so, because there are people who, if you look at globally as a country, not globally, but across the country, our spending rate has gone up as compared to what it was a decade back.
Really? Okay.
Right? So people are saving less, they're spending more, those habits are still happening, but that's more on a personal need basis, kind of thing, right? So this is more software for my business, kind of thing, right? So whether your willingness, if they understand the value, I think they will pay for it, kind of thing. It's also an opportunity for founders to make that software very simple, show value, so that people will not hesitate just on the price point, kind of thing, right? That's one way of also looking at it. Kind of thing.
So at this point, like, how I'm thinking about this is, so if I can contrast this to, let's say, consumer products, right? Or some solutions which might work in the US, but when you try to lift it and bring it to India, it may completely break down.
Correct.
So like,
we need specific solutions for India.
So I'm thinking that it will not. So even if you build something for the Indian market, it will not translate.
That's
so
right.
Do we need like two different?
Yeah, exactly. Every market is different, right? So what you are building for India potentially might work for another market that's similar to India, right? To some extent, kind of thing. Of course, that will require its own level of customization and stuff. But you can't use, to your point, something that you built for a developed market like US to a developing market like India, kind of thing, right? So you need that level of understanding of what the customer wants, what the business wants, and tailor it to that versus ripping something from there and just kind of building it and reusing it, kind of thing.
For me, that seems like isn't that like a big challenge? Like in the sense, or am I missing something here?
No, I don't think it's a big challenge. I think it's about, you only have finite dollars as a startup also, kind of thing, right? If you're looking at startups, you get some funding, you're building something, you have to figure out where do I get my maximum ROI, kind of thing, right? So if your maximum ROI is coming quickly from a US market, your natural gravitation would be towards that, kind of thing, right? So that's another reason to your early question why somebody would start there, kind of thing, right? But once you have learned, once the product is mature, right, there is always ways to kind of tailor it, customize it to specific markets,
okay,
right? And then you can you also will have, either you are on the path to profitability or you are profitable. So you have a little bit more leeway to experiment. Okay, for India, for a particular vertical, this is what I need to do to kind of crack that. Or it could be for a Middle Eastern market, or it could be for a Southeast Asian market, right? So that willingness to experiment can only happen once you reach a certain scale. Starting off itself, you can't spread yourself too thin and say, I will build a product that will work for all markets. There's no product like that, kind of thing, right? Or if there are, it's taken a long while to build also, kind of thing. So you start where you get your ROI first, you get traction, you get customer feedback, build it into your product, grow, become mature, and then you experiment with specific geographies. Then you go to India, then you talk to customers, see what they need, and then you kind of build something for India. It's not hard, it just takes time. That's how I put it.
In terms of, if I look at it from the US perspective, as an outsider looking in, one of the reasons I can think of, like, why would like a US provider choose like an Indian startup is like, maybe obviously it might be a better product.
Yeah.
That's okay. But if we can drill down, I'm thinking like, it's much cheaper because of cheap labor as well. Like Indian labor will be much cheaper than, let's say, the US labor. So I'm guessing there's some efficiency component to that as well, where it makes it more attractive. Are those like the major reasons?
Yeah, actually, so there are multiple reasons emerging now, kind of thing, right? Earlier, it was more about cost. So something that an Indian SaaS player builds has always been more cost efficient for US consumers.
And that's primarily due to salaries, or?
So salary is one, yeah. So and generally it's also capital efficiency, right? So because salary is one component. Next is your cost of operations. So you're building software out of India versus having your office space, all your other costs that are in addition to salaries, kind of thing, right? Second is the speed at which you can build because you have access to talent, right? In a lot of countries, it's harder to get high quality engineering talent so easily across variety of domains, front end, back end, artificial intelligence, data infrastructure, so many different domains are there, right? So that access to high quality engineering talent is very unique to India, kind of thing, right? Then I would also say, obviously, English language is an advantage if you compare it to some other countries, kind of thing, right? So the ability to kind of communicate and articulate things is also easier, kind of thing, right? Now it's shifted more from cost to also, there are companies who are building high quality products. So, they are able to kind of stand toe to toe with their US peers on security, on scalability, on trust, on efficiency. So across multiple domains and data points, right? So it's not just about cost now, it's also about what value you're bringing to the customer. So in fact, there are instances where people are willing to spend even more on an Indian SaaS player as compared to somebody elsewhere, just because they're seeing much more value coming out of it, which is a very good transition also for the industry in India, kind of thing, right? So it's not always about, you're not fighting an uphill battle with competitors that, it's always about price. It's also about the value now, kind of thing, right? Because there have been enough use cases. There are instances now where people have seen, okay, I'm getting higher quality software, I'm getting better customer support, because you can build a big customer support instance out of India that can serve anywhere in the world, kind of thing, right? It could be not just on cost, but also on the efficiency, kind of thing, right? Much more respondent, much more kind of quicker to solve issues, kind of thing, right? So those kinds of things are also differentiating Indian SaaS players now as compared to a decade earlier, I would say.
Again, as an outsider, I feel in India, like I feel most this may also like showcase my ignorance as well, but I feel like most of these companies, B2B at least, are somewhat started in Chennai.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I mean, is there an ecosystem there?
Yeah, so I think, a lot of people in Chennai who say that Chennai is the SaaS capital of India, kind of thing. And to some extent it is true as well. I think with Zoho and Freshworks, there are strong roots there, kind of thing. And obviously the talent that started, the first level of talent, right? So the people who are building these products, once they reached a certain scale at Zoho and Freshworks, they started building their own companies.
And I think Freshworks came out of Zoho.
That's right. I mean, Girish worked at Zoho, and then he came out and then he started Freshworks. So just like that, there are multiple instances where people worked at Freshworks or at Zoho and then they've started companies, but use Chennai as the base, kind of thing, right? So I think Chennai has a very strong SaaS ecosystem. Bangalore also has. Then your other tier 1 cities, Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta, Pune, all of them have good SaaS ecosystems. What's interesting is now cities like Surat, Indore, Bhopal, are in Jaipur, all these cities have started emerging as, even Coimbatore to some extent, have started emerging as, big software builders, kind of thing, right? So product builders, kind of thing. I think pandemic is also was one of the reasons where, people moved back to their hometowns, weren't comfortable coming back, wanted to spend some more time with their family. So they feel that, they can build software from anywhere, kind of thing, right? So they went back, started companies from, wherever they were living earlier, and now are looking to kind of scale it from there, kind of thing, right? Which is great. I mean, it's like you have this proliferation across the country. We don't want more people coming to Bangalore and Chennai and building software just for the sake of it, right? You need, because there's high quality talent available across India. So there's no reason for anyone to just limit themselves to a tier 1 city for the matter of fact, kind of thing.
I'm actually not very convinced with that.
Okay.
In the sense that the way I'm thinking about this is like, so one is a US example, which is like most of the innovation has definitely come from Silicon Valley. Even if you look at India, maybe I feel like most of the innovation, at least in startups, has come from Bangalore. Even though there might be some satellite cities where, now and then...
It's still early. Yeah, I agree with that hypothesis that, it's just starting to happen, kind of thing. It'll take some time to prove itself out.
But I also feel like, it's also like sort of the nature of innovation where once you have like, how Chennai may have like SaaS network effects, it becomes very difficult to kind of like overcome that.
Those are valid points. So that's why I'm saying it's going to take some time. For example, to your point, if you want to have a meetup with founders in a particular area, it's very easy to do that in Bangalore.
Correct.
If you go to HSR, or if you go to Koramangala, or if you go to or Indiranagar, for example, it's very easy to find people that you can bounce ideas off or have questions that you can get answers to, whereas you have to do it over a Zoom call at sometimes. So it's still early. But my point being, like, it's good that it's not concentrated. It's good that people are able to build things that can make a difference from anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country, kind of thing, for the world, kind of thing, right? It might take time to evolve. I mean, I don't see it happening in the next year or so, but it's good that at least people are, free to kind of build. The location is not a constraint to build something disruptive and massive, kind of thing, right?
So I have like finance examples where they have innovated outside of like major cities. obviously is Warren Buffett. Like he does not reside in like Wall Street or New York. He's in Omaha. I
Yes,
guess.
that's right, yeah.
Another is I think Bridgewater Associates.
Yes.
I think they're also not in like Wall Street per se, and they're in some other.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a tech example.
Yeah.
My mind went to Microsoft.
Yes, you can say Microsoft at that time, Seattle, Redmond was
Not like a
not
tech.
like exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Correct.
So you never know. You just need one good use case. So even say 25 years back, no one would have expected Chennai to be what they are today from SaaS point of view, right? So you never know.
Correct.
So it's if there are 10 cities that are trying, maybe 2 or 3 will just emerge out and kind of. It's just that access to talent is so much better and widespread in India that your geography or location doesn't need to put your arm around your back kind of thing. That okay, you have to move to Bangalore or you have to move to Bombay or you have to move to Chennai, for example, right? So I think that's the good part kind of thing. So we'll see how it plays out.
Can I probe you on like what does it take
Yeah.
to build like a good SaaS company maybe?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a few things based on my understanding and experience. So I think obviously understanding the customer needs in terms of what you're trying to build, pain points and what problem is paramount. It could be a very specialized use case that you're solving for one particular vertical, or it could be a large market where you're building something horizontal that can be applied across multiple verticals kind of thing, right? So I think understanding what vertical you're trying to build, what problem you're trying to solve, I think that would be number one. Second, having an excellent team around you in terms of co-founders and leadership team, just so that you can rely on each other, trust each other. There's a lot of downs, and even though we focus on the ups, there are a lot of downs during the process of building a company, SaaS company specifically, right? So I think you have to have a good team around you to kind of rely on them, go through, share what your thoughts are, and rely on each other kind of thing, right? So that would be number two. And third is focusing on what market, how large a market it is. If it's a small market, do you have enough product depth or IP that you can actually increase market share over time kind of thing, right? So I think having a very good nuanced understanding of the market and market dynamics is also the third most important factor. So these three largely would be the top 3 factors.
To just track my progress every day,
yeah.
I use it. But their integration of some of the AI tools has been very fast.
Yeah.
One thing that you mentioned was you specifically you spoke about the November timeline of the ChatGPT release.
Yeah.
But so for you, that's like a pivotal moment.
Yes,
Because
I mean it's more from awareness. I mean,
because the tech of that
has been so generative AI, especially in the companies that we have invested in, and also in a lot of other companies. Generative AI is part of the product development lifecycle for a while. Now the awareness and the brand visibility around generative AI started coming out once ChatGPT got 1 million subscribers in 5 days or something like that kind of thing, right? So it's like a seminal moment, right? So there has to be, you can build stuff, you can work on stuff. I mean, I did study AI 15 years back, but what AI I studied at that time to what AI is now is so different, right? So AI had the potential then also, but this is the right time. So timing wise, this seems to be the right time, and framework is also around where for people to understand its impact. So the rate at which enterprises will adopt. Now, if you talk to CIOs or CDOs in enterprises across the world, they are, in all the surveys that we see, they are all talking about how do I incorporate generative AI in my stack? Either build it organically or leverage something that's adding value kind of thing. So the timing is the crucial part.
I feel like large companies in terms of like generative AI technology, I feel like they have like an advantage.
Yes,
One
that's
is
true.
Obviously, the foundation models that requires a lot of capital, but they also have. One is like once they have access to that technology before they release it, obviously they have this time to figure out like applications of it, and also maybe they get a sense of like what can be developed as well. So are they like
yes? So they are definitely, so companies like Nvidia, Microsoft, Google, all these guys have an advantage. Even AWS, Amazon kind of thing, right? Because they are at the infrastructure level. All the compute is going to flow down to them. So the moment your models are running, even if you have your own model built on top of them, you're going to be paying them for consumption anyways, kind of thing, right? So they will be eating a slice of pie. But the idea and the thought process and the understanding is that the pie is going to expand significantly, or it is going to kind of, the use case and the application is so wide that there will be enough for companies to kind of still make and grow a good amount of profits. The profit pools are still existing for them to play into kind of thing, right? Now, if you spend $1, you can argue that, okay, 40 to 50% might go to your infrastructure players. You're only playing with 40 to 50. But the pool or the market itself is growing and it's large. So then you can still create a lot of impact in the rest.
So like in terms of GPT-3, you can effectively think of it like a platform, right?
Yes.
And everybody else is kind of building on top of that platform.
That's right. So we have use cases, let's say in financial services, a simple use case, right? Where you can take a GPT-3 instance and then you can build something to, pull key information from earnings results for different companies. Based on that, you can say, hey, this is how the company's earnings were over the last, 6 quarters, let's say, kind of thing. Yeah, these are public companies. And based on that, depending on how the model works, you can provide some intelligence on how the company is likely to perform over the next few quarters, kind of thing. So those kinds of use cases are valuable to a financial analyst, to somebody who's looking and understanding, how a company can potentially grow over the next few quarters and so on and so forth. Right? So that's a very simple use case that you can build on top of GPT kind of thing.
Also, like partly we have, in a way, we have already gone through the motions with this. I'm referring this to like LLMs are recent, but before that we had like computer vision models
That's
as
right,
well,
that's right.
and we've kind of seen how that played out.
Correct,
Where
correct.
even though Google and even Facebook open source, they had their own models.
That's right.
A lot of independent companies also were able to like train their own models or like use the vision models to
Correct.
have like their own unique business cases as well.
Correct. It's just the adoption has grown significantly over the last few months and maybe close to a year now, I would say, and it's only going to grow more because as people start seeing the use cases
Right.
and the impact of the use cases, there's always a sense of, okay, how can I create, and just think of it, the ability of automation, right? Like you're talking about improving productivity across organizations to the tune of up to 30% kind of thing, right? Where you can be, as a software developer, you can be spending time on writing more core code than other things that you typically end your day spending time on kind of thing, right? So you can leave all the non-essential pieces of work for somebody like an AI automated tool, and you focus on the core business logic and adding value on that kind of thing, right? Another use case is on the legal tech side, right? Where there is so many contracts that you have to till now you were manually going through everything, you're doing back and forth. Whereas a Gen AI tool can essentially automate a lot of those processes. So you avoid the back and forth, you save time, you can focus more on, business specific decisions versus a lot of grunt work kind of thing, right? So the amount of automation and the ability to kind of improve productivity is a huge use case that's coming out as well.
And you think this is going to touch like all sectors, is it? Or do you think it's going to be very like somewhat sector specific?
I think to start off with, there will be specific use cases just so that people see the value. Like I mentioned, a couple of use cases. I think it'll be in pockets around this. And as it scales up, then we will see if there are possible extensions and use cases in other sectors. Like financial services, healthcare seem like natural areas where these technologies could disrupt and create a lot of improvements kind of thing, right? But in some other verticals where rate of adoption of technology is also slower, it could take a little bit longer as well kind of thing. But we'll see how it plays out.
Like one more point on the like computer vision models
Yeah.
is like vision models never had like a ChatGPT moment. Like there was no consumer facing product where people were
blown away by something.
Yeah,
kind of
maybe
thing.
DALI is one, but DALI came so late.
Late,
Like
yeah.
it was in 2019. I
Yeah,
think, I don't
that's
know.
right, that's right.
But like vision models started appearing in 2016, 2014,
Yeah,
around that time. But
that's
there was no like consumer facing where people were blown away by this.
Correct.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all the crescendo just built up one by one to ChatGPT moment, and now it's like this is the right time. Kind of.
Like the most weird thing for me, at least, was I think ChatGPT was released in November, but I think just a month or two back, Facebook also had released like
That's
a
right.
similar interface, but they had to shut it down because it was spewing spam or it was saying
That's
some
right.
offensive things.
That's right.
But just a month after that, ChatGPT became so successful.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, they gave a flavor of what could be possible
Yeah.
because they had some things they needed to fix. But even after that, like now they've come up with an open source model along with Microsoft, which is potentially disruptive kind of thing, right? Because if you're able to access high quality models, open source, there's a constant debate. Open source.
You're talking about OpenAI Microsoft or Facebook Microsoft?
Facebook, Microsoft.
Llama model.
Llama, yes, that's right. So, it's always a debate whether you want to close source or open source kind of thing, right? But the ability, at least from a software development and access point of view, open source opens up so many doors that, you can start building things that could be potentially disruptive much faster and at scale. Kind of.
I want to ask you on the concept of moat
Yes.
in SaaS.
Yes.
So first, let me share my understanding of moat, and you can correct me because mostly it's going to be wrong. So when I think of moat, I think of something which is very unique to a company, which is extremely difficult or impossible to replicate.
That's
I'll try to think of an example. I think Coke is one example, maybe because of Warren Buffett. So I feel like the Coke recipe, one is the Coke recipe, but also I think the branding of Coke is like due to so many years and maybe the consistency of the message is so consistent
Correct.
that it's very difficult to kind of, and that becomes like a moat and very difficult to replicate. That's one example I can think of. Is my
Yeah,
understanding
I
correct?
think that's a very valid consumer mode kind of thing,
Correct.
right? So I think if you look at Microsoft, could be an example where in any enterprise you go to, you will see something of Microsoft there kind of thing, like generally, largely speaking kind of thing, right? So what Coke potentially is to the consumer world, you can say Microsoft has been able to create that through its distribution power. Some would argue that from a technology mode point of view, probably not as strong as some of the others, but purely from a reach and distribution and access kind of thing, it's been like prevalent in a large variety of enterprises kind of thing, right? So I would look at moats in different buckets, right? Traditionally, you look at it, if you have some technical moat where your product has something which is so unique that no one else can build or copy, and once you're in an enterprise or with the customer, no one is going to take it away kind of thing, right? I think that has evolved over the last decade or so kind of thing, right? Like especially coming back to SaaS, right? It's always been that generally it's not a winner take all market.
Okay.
Generally it is, okay, there are so many CRM tools, right? Salesforce, HubSpot, Zoho, Freshworks. You could argue why Zoho, Freshworks became successful kind of thing in spite of incumbents being there, right? So generally in SaaS, there is always an opportunity to disrupt. It could be based on what segment you're serving. It could be based on cost. It could be based on features. It could be based on integration, how well your product is integrating with other things, how easy it is to use, how good a customer response you're able to give for issues, for newer features and functionality. So it depends on a lot of these things. And if you're able to provide value to a customer across multiple such domains, not necessarily only technical mode, then you have what I call is like a distribution or a well-rounded moat, because you are so entrenched into the enterprise, not just on one use case. You are solving multiple workflow issues for a particular enterprise, right? Let's say you're solving their IT problems, you're solving their, let's say, networking problems kind of thing, right? If you're able to showcase value that you are a core piece of platform or value add across multiple workflows, then it's very hard for any enterprise to replace you kind of thing, right? So you create a moat by entering an enterprise through first your product, through some level of differentiation on the factors that I mentioned, and then you spread yourselves gradually across the enterprise. So then people find it extremely hard for going to somebody else to replace you. So I will look at it more across multiple factors than just one single.
No, it's not like you have this one recipe or this
That's
one thing.
That's right.
It's very difficult to do that.
Very difficult, because ultimately software, if you throw enough money on it, anybody can replicate it kind of thing.
Like I've also heard that it's relatively easy to build like a $1 to $5 million SaaS business. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, now I would say, because there have been so many success stories or so many stories on how to build something to that scale, it's easy to replicate. But easy is also relatively, I would quantify it by saying you need to still understand what you're solving for.
Okay.
Right? If you're to get to product market fit, for every success story, there have been 10 attempts which have not worked out kind of thing, right? So yeah.
I'm just sorry. So just to understand this, like if you have started a SaaS business and you're my neighbor and you have maybe done 3-4 iterations and now you found whatever quote unquote PMF, and now I see you shifting your houses to a big bungalow and you've got like a Mercedes S-Class and now I want to copy you.
Yeah.
So I see what business you're in and I hire like 3-4 from intern Shala and we build like a product. We copy your product end to end, and so from there it becomes relatively easy. Is it to build?
Yeah, your product development might be faster because you already know what has worked and what has not worked because you're following the product.
Correct.
But what your differentiation is your distribution. How are you able to sell the product? If you're only able to sell on price, there will be somebody who is always there to come and sell at a cheaper rate kind of thing. So you need to have that stickiness across multiple domains. Value. How are you creating value for an enterprise, for your customer, right? And like coming back to the point, it cannot be on one single pane of glass. It has to be multiple workflows. So without you, the enterprise cannot operate across, say, 4 or 5 workflows. Then you have got your moat. You might be able to copy my product, but are you able to create customer value through a good sales engine, through a good marketing engine, through a very good customer success team, through a very good integrations, through a very good, scalability of your platform kind of thing. So all those things are very hard to copy because that is built over experience, over time, understanding of the customer, so on and so forth kind of thing. So you can create moats, but not necessarily only on technology, to my point earlier.
Understood. But just like I'm also getting a sense that unless you're trying something, and maybe this is generally true as well, maybe this is not only applicable to SaaS, like unless you're really approaching a new category or it's very difficult to differentiate. Like
it's hard.
It becomes very hard. No?
Yeah. Because now there are so many companies that are serving specific areas. Let's say sales and marketing, for example, right? Then you can only go so far that you can differentiate yourself, kind of thing, right? Unless you are completely disrupting an existing market, which is something that has never been done before. There is always players there which you will be competing with, kind of thing. There have been stories where people were able to disrupt existing markets, with limited differentiation as well, based on other criteria that I've mentioned. But it's harder. That journey is much harder.
Let's start with funding.
Yeah.
One thing I heard while at least prepping for this is like too much capital for a SaaS, like for consumer startups, right? Like apparently like a lot of capital helps them. But apparently that is not essentially true for like a SaaS business. Is that true? And can you explain like why?
Yeah,
and how should we think about funding as well?
Yeah. So I think that's true, especially for a lot of people who are starting up. I think if you need to first focus on getting to PMF, right? I think that's the first major milestone that's even more important in a SaaS company than a consumer company kind of thing, because what you're building needs to be bought by somebody that you don't know, right? They are only purchasing it for the value kind of thing, right? Now what can happen if a SaaS company is funded too much early on kind of thing is you tend to kind of go in multiple different directions. You might try to build something for a particular customer segment, then quickly try and pivot if it doesn't work to something else, or so on and so forth. Or you might be focused on multiple issues rather than nailing down on a particular problem and trying to understand how you can solve that problem kind of thing, right? That's one issue kind of thing. Second, you don't want to be taking too much dilution as a founder very early on kind of thing, right? Because obviously, if you're building something disruptive and for the long term, you need to be able to be in a position where you can raise good amount of money through the course of the growth of the company, right? You want a good seed, you want a series A, B, C, D, E, all the way up to IPO kind of thing, right? So if you're raising too much amount of money initially, obviously as a founder, you can dilute it. That gets harder to raise subsequent rounds of funding kind of thing, right? Obviously, as you go later on in the life cycle, you might look at, okay, I have raised X dollars, how much revenue I'm able to generate kind of thing, right? And if that ratio doesn't look good, as an investor, you will be looking at, why is it taken him or her so much money to scale just to $1 million of revenue, for example, right? So the ability to quickly demonstrate PMF and scale to, I would say, a tipping point of, proving that, okay, customers like your product, will buy your product, you have built enough repeatable sales motion is the reason why you don't want to go over-indexed early on, and then gradually keep funding in the back pocket, and as you scale and grow, you can get better valuation also as you're growing the company.
So another thing I think related to this, which I kind of got a sense of, was there seems to be some science behind like SaaS business models. Like one is, I think earlier we also touched on like this seems to be a predictability.
Yes.
But also I want to touch on like, do you think it's relatively easy to kind of get PMF in like these kind of businesses as opposed to let's say consumer types or other types of businesses? That is one point. And also maybe I'm also trying to make my case better of saying science in the sense like your revenues also paint like a picture or like give a sense of where the business is and where the business should be going in the next few years, and so that gives you some sort of clarity which may not be available for other sort of businesses. Is that fair?
That's fair, because to our point earlier, when you're selling to a business, you will have a different contract as compared to if you're selling to a consumer kind of thing, right? So your churn, your cohort, your number of users versus number of paying users, all these things matter a lot in a consumer business kind of thing, right? Whereas in a SaaS business, it's more about can you acquire new logos, right? Are you able to get new customers, and once you get them, are they paying you for incremental features over a period of time, right? So they might come in with a small deal where they're buying a particular feature, but once they like that feature, are you able to upsell them other features over a period of time? So that's how you should look at it from a business difference point of view, I would say, where it's more sticky. The cost of acquisition of a customer is higher, whereas in a consumer business might be lower, but you don't have predictability, right? So that's how the difference is kind of.
Like one more thing on the science of like SaaS business models might be like I've heard at least this, I was listening to this one lecture where apparently if the sales guy does not hit like X number of their quota, apparently because of the nature of the business, you should be able to kind of hit those quotas, and if they're not, you should just fire the guy. So that's where I was getting the sense that okay, apparently this like there seems to be some science, even though I'm not able to articulate.
That's fair. I mean the science being that you have built a product that customers want to buy. Second is there is enough features that are built in that you can upsell to a customer once you're in the door of the customer, right? So as a salesperson, you can build your pipeline working towards your quota in such a way that these are my 10 top of the funnel prospects, out of which I already know that the requirements, there are 3 who have urgent requirements of this software. Out of those 3, I know that I am in a good position to sell in 2 of them. On the third one, maybe I am facing some competitive pressure, but I can still kind of make a deal. So your pipeline becomes a little bit more structured in the way how you're moving from top of the funnel to the bottom of the funnel. The only thing is, are you able to close it in the required time? Because the buying cycle might be longer. So are you able to say within this quarter, I'm able to close this amount of business kind of thing, right? So that's the only challenging part. Now, don't get me wrong, this will take time. This is not like something that you build a product and you can say a salesperson is just to go and sell kind of thing, because there has to be a need from the customer side. If there is an existing product there, you have to displace that product. So you have to show that incremental value to the customer so that they buy your product. So all that takes time. It's not going to happen in one quarter, especially if you're selling into enterprise. Sales cycle could be 6 months, 9 months, even a year in some cases kind of thing, right? Now, that's why companies building out of India have been successful in the small to mid-sized businesses, like I said, where sales cycle is shorter. It could be 30 to 60 days, where you just buy something by putting your credit card details on the website and purchase a piece of software kind of thing, right? Or you sign a contract and then start using it. That also can be done quickly. Onboarding time is shorter. So this SMB market has been easier to crack. The enterprise sales cycle takes a little bit longer kind of thing, right? So it depends on which market you serve. I wouldn't say it's easy, but there's more predictability at least once you know that the product is appreciated by the customers.
I'm also getting like the salespeople seems to be very integral.
Yes, it's crucial, right? Like even I would say once the engineers are important, but the sales team, the marketing team, the commercial, the go-to-market team in general, even the partnerships team, right? All these are different pillars in the GTM motion that are extremely crucial kind of thing, right? So starting with the founder. If you're an early stage company, obviously the founder is your biggest salesman, so he or she will be the number one. But then eventually you need a good team of account executives, the pre-sales team, technical account managers.
I've heard like customer success.
So customer success is extremely crucial in SaaS business to help scale. Once you land, let's say you're selling a $100,000 product to an enterprise customer, but a customer success team can truly take that $100,000 product to $1 million if they are incentivized the right way, they're the right set of people, they know whom they're selling to, what they're selling, so on and so forth, right? So these are all extremely crucial pillars that help really take the SaaS company to the next level.
So it's not like a quote unquote tech company per se, where like in a sense the way I'm thinking about this is like where you build the tech and people will come and it's just the business flourishes. It seems like there are so many parts they have to succeed like together, and only then you will see like a very sustainable business.
That's right. So that's your typical SaaS company. Now there have been like product-led growth companies where to your point of technology-led adoption kind of thing, where you're building a let's say a developer tools focused product. There's a very good example of a company called Postman. Yeah, so which started developing APIs for other companies to use their APIs and integrate with multiple workflows and functions kind of thing, right? So there you're selling into developers kind of thing, right? So there it's more about your product is so strong that people will just come and adopt that kind of thing, right? So they'll get attracted to the technology. It's less about outbound, it's more about inbound kind of thing, right? That's a different business model and a different GTM motion kind of thing, right? Your horizontal and vertical SaaS, which we've covered upon, is the points that I spoke about: account execs, sales team, marketing team, so on and so forth, selling into the enterprise where you need a proper team and so on, customer success. So there are two different pieces of the pie kind of thing, right? Yeah, that's how I would look at it.
How should we think about like TAM? And so by TAM, I think it's target addressable market.
Yes.
And I think for SaaS businesses, I also came across the serviceable, and it's called SAM.
SAM, that's
understood.
right. Yeah.
So how should we think about it, and what is its important?
Yeah, so I think it's extremely important to understand how big the market opportunity is, right? You could be building some software for a very specific use case that is only solving a particular problem. So your total addressable market will be very small in that case. Now, in order for you to create an impact, you will have to become the single largest dominant player in that niche market. So that's a much harder problem to solve. Of course, you can develop a strong technical IP. You can become extremely specialized where you are the only person that that can solve the problem. But you will require a lot of domain depth there to kind of crack that, right? In other cases, for example, we are talking about CRM earlier, so Freshworks. These are large TAM markets because everybody needs to use a CRM tool, right? So you're talking about a very large market, but then you have another problem where a lot of competitors are there kind of thing, right? So how do you penetrate that, right? So, but at least you know that you're not fighting for every single dollar because the market is small. You don't want to get to a stage where you're running out of market adoption because the market size is too small, kind of thing, right? So ideally, you should be targeting something which is large or something that's meaningful. And serviceable addressable market is something, I would say, if you look at a Venn diagram, target addressable market is the outer layer, serviceable addressable market is the inner layer. So it's a subset of the TAM. So that is something that you as a SaaS company can target at a much greater rate than the TAM kind of thing. It could be because your product is suited for that market. It could be because your customer segment is only for that market. Or it could be because, the rest of the market, like the difference between the TAM and the SAM is such that you cannot address it for whatever reason kind of thing, right? So serviceable addressable market is a subset, but it's something where you can gain more market share because it's a piece of the market versus the entire market kind of thing. So that's how I would think about it.
So broadly, it's better to go into a segment which has like a larger TAM.
Within that, the SAM could be a small one, but you're building something that could crack it much easier than going after a small TAM market itself.
Understood. But at the end of the day, for a builder, I think it'll be a very subjective decision in the sense that, like, if somebody has a very, and this is obviously a corner case, in the sense like if I have expertise in a very, then it becomes a very subjective decision.
Yeah. Generally, you would see majority of them building towards a larger market.
Understood.
Because it requires a lot of expertise to build something for a very specific niche market. For example, let's say if you're building an AI tool that is going to help accelerate drug discovery within a specific genome or protein kind of thing, right? Sure, it could be a small market, but if you're able to crack it, you can really move the needle significantly. But you need to have that level of domain depth in the team so that you could build something like that, right? So that's the trade-off, I would say.
Understood. And once you have your product, so again, contrasting this to maybe consumer products, like when I think about, let's say, Netflix or Disney or Hotstar, maybe Jio Cinema, the pricing in general is like, somewhat on the, like, there is deviation, but there's some, somewhat. So how is there like standardization in like SaaS markets as well, or like in the sense like most of them charge like $12 per month or something, and then a company comes up with like $14, okay, no, that is too much. No matter. So how?
Yeah, so I think that also depends on the customer segment. So I would say for the small to mid-sized businesses that you're targeting that can typically buy software off internet or off your website, generally the pricing variance would be low because anyways you're charging at a lower price. It could be $10 per user per month, for example, right? Let's say, just using an example. So for that, okay, how much variance you're going to be able to give? You could be either at 10 or at 12 or at 8 kind of thing. It's harder to go beyond that kind of thing, right? So your variance is lower. But when you're going to enterprise, the variance becomes higher because your opportunity size is also larger, and your ability to tailor solutions or make solutions more specific for particular enterprises, there is a wider range there. So in some cases, particular companies could be charging $100,000 per year for an enterprise, let's say. In some other cases, a competitor could be charging $50,000, right? So you have $50,000 variance there. But enterprises might still go with the $100,000 startup or company because they are creating value across multiple issues for the enterprise kind of thing, right? So there it becomes less about price variance, more about features, values, ROI, right? So that's the nuance I would say based on customer segment.
I've also heard like SaaS businesses have like very crazy margins, like 85 to
80 to 90%, in some cases about 90% as well, kind of thing, right? Because once you build the software, then it's just about incremental features and distribution kind of thing.
So just to make sure I understand that, in the sense that if the customer is paying them 10 rupees, then 8 rupees is their profit.
That's correct.
8 rupees is the profit.
Gross margins. So you still have to account for sales and marketing cost, operating cost, all those kinds of things, so which adds to your cost. But your actual COGS is very low kind of thing, right? So that's
understood.
So you have sales, then you have your gross margins, which is very high, 80 to 90. Then you will have other layers of cost. So your operating cost is high, then your operating margins will be lower. But as you scale, you will eventually your operating margin will turn profitable.
Consumer companies generally focus on like I feel like all my contrasts are like consumer companies, but in the sense that there seems to be like a major emphasis on growth first and then
That's
profitability. Does that same apply to like SaaS?
I think till before the pandemic, it was heavily indexed on growth. Even now, if you're early stage, growth is always given an importance. But there's something called as rule of 40 within SaaS.
Okay.
It's a metric that investors look at SaaS companies at. So what that means is like, what is your revenue growth times your free cash flow kind of. So if you're loss making, if your net, if your growth is 100% and if you're let's say negative 20% on free cash flow, so overall you're about 80% kind of thing, right? So your rule of 40 is still in good space there kind of thing. But if your revenue growth is low and your free cash flow burn is high, then obviously you're missing the rule of 40. But so that's the trade-off there. So you still index on growth, but now companies and startups have also started to realize with the funding winter that we can't be burning so much money to generate ARR kind of thing. There has to be a certain plan and a path to eventually get to profitability kind of thing. Right? So growth is not indexed as much as consumer, but still you are given importance with the plan to get to profitability eventually.
Again, I feel like that's like the science of, like, I don't know,
That's
for me, like,
That's
because in consumer, I feel like there is nothing of that sort. Like,
That's right.
people are just throwing money
That's right,
for
that's
whatever
right.
point, but here there should be some measure.
Yeah.
I thought looking at some of the internet, some of the AI funding, I thought the winter was over, but you're saying it's still
No, I mean, so generative AI aside, I think, if you look at public companies SaaS multiples, they have come down significantly from the pandemic days.
Okay.
But having said that, they are still at the levels it was pre-pandemic. It's just that the pandemic multiples were so high that we feel that, the reversion to mean is a misnomer kind of thing, right? It's actually gone back to what it was.
Understood.
So it's not as big. It's just that founders are now realizing that even expectations of crazy valuations are not realistic, and let's build something that's more sustainable, which is good. I mean, for the ecosystem, it's good for investors as well as founders, because they're building something for the long term.
We'll start with hiring, I think, no? One is like, is the talent available, or the kind of talent needed to build like a SaaS product different from like other kind of companies? Is there some variance, or do you think it's the same? Plus, like domestic versus international, how should is there a difference between the way hiring works or skills needed per se? How do you think about it?
I think if you look at product development and engineering talent, depending on the domain that you're looking to build, if it's a very verticalized kind of SaaS company, then you will need some amount of domain depth. So that
what do you mean?
So like somebody who's building something for healthcare or financial services,
Okay.
it's better to have some background and experience in that versus a generic software developer kind of thing, right? So I think that's where the difference comes between hiring for a SaaS company versus somewhere. Otherwise, if you're looking at a backend engineer who's built something for a consumer startup at scale can translate his or her skills very easily into a SaaS company as well, right? So I think that if you have that nuance, I think it should be fine. And what's interesting that's happened is so many engineering colleges and now, like we touched upon earlier, tier 2 cities, that access to talent, especially to build products at scale, is much easier now. And I'll link it to the Aadhaar and UPI example as well, where we've had instances of building software for India or technology or digital adoption in India at such massive scale, be it UPI, be it Aadhaar, that the know-how and experience is integrated both as a user as well as potentially a builder in these areas kind of thing, right? So to leverage or tap into that talent is huge opportunity for a new SaaS company that's looking to build something globally impactful kind of thing, right? So in that ways, I think in Indian market, you have an advantage of seeing technology disruption at scale as a user, and to think through as a developer on what this could mean as well.
When I was thinking about like Aadhaar and its implementation, like initially I had this thought in my mind that this is just government's method of like surveilling its citizens. Like, at least that was my way of thinking about it. And I had like this very negative view of it, and it may turn out to be true. I mean, the picture of Baki has sort of situation where the movie's still going on. I was talking to Rupify founder as well, and so he was explaining to me like how it makes the process of like identification or verification so easy that it really completely changed my view. That the hurdles that you had to go previously to do certain things, and now it becomes so streamlined. And now it's completely changed my mind.
That's right. No, that's very valid kind of thing, right? And only when you have gone through the process earlier of getting bank account open, or let's say paying for new electricity connection or something like that you realize that how important Aadhaar has been.
Correct.
Because of saving time, saving your cost, accessibility, and just that the ability to even do KYC just based on a
video
KYC from anywhere. You might be traveling to any corner of the world and you have to do a video KYC. You can do it, and it automatically face recognition, retina recognition. All these technologies have been adopted, right? And to do it across 1.4 billion people, nothing has been done in such scale anywhere in the world kind of thing, right? So yeah, that's the level of proliferation that's happening. Even UPI, for example, right? I mean, there's no other country in the world that payments have become so easy and streamlined. You go to a small vendor in the corner, you don't have to carry cash. You can literally kind of make the payment, buy fruits or anything kind of thing, right? Like, it's become so universally adopted across the country that, it makes traveling easier, it makes trade easier.
That's a double-edged sword actually. So I actually went to my hometown, I think 2 months back, and I was so used to paying. So I don't carry cash anymore in Bangalore, or very little.
Yeah.
And when I was going home, I still had that Bangalore mentality. Everybody has UPI.
Yeah.
I reached home at around 5 in the morning, 4 or 5 in the morning, and I have to take a bus from the bus stop to my hometown per se.
Got it.
And as soon as I get on the bus, I realize I have no cash.
Yeah.
So sometimes
Yeah.
it's not like I operate every.
That's right. Maybe there is still room to grow there, kind of thing, right? But just in terms of, I mean, if you're living in a metro city,
Definitely.
kind of thing, I think the ease at which you can do financial transactions is a game changer for consumers.
And I think it's been most prevalent in finance, right? Because
That's right.
the example that you mentioned of like opening a bank account,
Yeah.
like I think previously you had to go to like the branch, and it was such a
Such a
headache.
headache,
I
yeah,
remember,
yeah.
and these bank guys also can be so annoying, and
It takes time.
Takes time as well. And I feel like they had this sort of monopoly of it, like the guy sitting there like had this monopoly where without him the work
That's right,
wouldn't
that's
move.
right, that's
And so
right.
he had this power dynamic.
Yes.
Oh my god! And now it's become.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a game-changing technology, yeah. And to the second question on hiring, so coming back to internationalize, I think that's extremely crucial, especially if you're catering to, and like majority of the SaaS companies do cater to the US market. When do you hire a salesperson in the US, right? A lot of times you tend to go and hire somebody senior from a large company, and then, they don't have the experience of working in a smaller startup kind of environment, and it might not work out kind of thing, right? So, whom do you hire? When do you hire? Do you hire once you reach a particular scale kind of thing, right? So all these questions are extremely important to answer kind of thing, right? So typically founders that have done it successfully are when they've reached some sort of PMF, where they've been selling predominantly till that stage. And then they've found that, okay, hiring a trusted advisor, ideally, if that person has experience of working in a more agile startup environment, with a combination of a big company experience where products are more mature, then you kind of bring the best of both the worlds into your sales role or a GTM role kind of thing, right? That's the ideal case. Or in some cases where they've worked in other early stage companies where they've grown the revenue from, let's say, 1 million to 10 million kind of thing, right? So that kind of experience can be replicated kind of thing, right? So instead of going for somebody who's very experienced in a large organization, going for somebody who's hungry to prove themselves in that kind of a 1 to 10 kind of a journey is what typically, in my understanding of talking to founders, has worked well kind of thing, right?
So you find some PMF, I mean, you grow to a certain stage domestically, and then once,
in the US,
in the
where
US.
the founder is doing the selling till that stage, and once they reach that PMF stage, then they go and hire a director of sales or somebody senior who can then build out their team with account execs and stuff and take over the sales function and scale it up.
I'm just curious in that, does it have to be somebody from the US, or do you think what happens is they send somebody over from India itself?
I think depends on, again, which field you're selling into kind of thing. If you're typically selling into an IT technology kind of user base, end user, somebody from here can relate easily and kind of speak the language kind of thing, right? But if you're selling to a customer that understands specific nuances that are there in the US, then the person from here will find it very difficult unless they have that experience there kind of thing, right? So that's the nuance there as well.
In terms of like hiring, during COVID, obviously, one was like valuations was multiples, but even salaries were like pretty crazy during COVID as well. Is it still the case?
No, I think it's now coming back to what it was earlier, along with other things kind of thing. I mean, there was serious fight for talent, especially on the engineering side, where engineers were getting 3 or 4 offers for every position they used to apply or be interested in kind of thing, right? I think now things have settled down a little bit where there is more understanding of, hey, I'm looking to hire somebody for the long term, and also a more realistic expectation from the employee or potential employee that, okay, let me first create an impact in the organization before I start demanding X, Y, and Z kind of thing, right? So I think we have gone back, just like SaaS multiples, we have gone back a little bit on expectations on the hiring side and reality, going back to reality.
It's normalized now. Understood. Segueing into like user as opposed to buyer. So the way I'm thinking about this is, when I make a product and if I make it for you, then you're the user and maybe you will give me feedback, or there is some feedback chain that I may get to learn from. And I may iterate my product and so on and so forth. In terms of B2Bs, what might happen, or at least the way I'm thinking about this is like, there's a manager who might, or there's a finance guy who might buy the product per se. He might do some cost benefit analysis and figure out this is the product, and he may buy it, but he may not use it.
Correct.
And the user might be some team that is distant from the person who's making the choice to buy the product.
Correct.
So in that, with that picture in mind, does it become difficult to like get feedback on the product, and does it your product development cycle, does that is that a good thing, is that a bad thing? How should we think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's very important. I think generally buying decisions, if it is coming from the procurement team or the finance team, would not be without a validation or an approval coming in from the user.
Okay.
So because you are ultimately, the user is going to be using the software kind of thing, right? So typically the way the sales motion would work is, if I'm building a product and you are the user, let's say you're in the marketing team and I'm building a product for the marketing team, right? I will go talk to you, show you the product, demonstrate value, let you do a proof of concept kind of thing. You test out the product, you give some feedback, I iterate on it, come back to you, and then you look at the product and you say it's good kind of thing. And then we have a joint call with the finance or the procurement team kind of thing, right? And then the finance team and procurement team decide, okay, in consultation with you, whether it makes sense to invest in this kind of thing, right? Okay, this is the budget that's allocated. Can we go with this? If a new budget has to be created, then it becomes harder. If a budget is already allocated, then it's easier decision kind of thing, right? But it will not happen without your seal of approval kind of thing, right? If it does happen, it becomes harder.
Understood.
In some cases where it might happen, it is harder because then there's a disconnect, But typically, if you are the end user and you're not in the loop of what software you're going to be using, you would not use it at all. So the finance team will typically not force a product down the user unless the user sees value beforehand, kind of thing.
I'm not very convinced with that in the sense that, since they're an employee, they have no choice. If the manager says...
That's a different thing. So if it's a manager versus a team member, that's a different thing, because a manager might see the value in the product, but a team member might not see the value till he or she uses it, kind of thing, right? Then there could be way the contracts could be structured that in the POC, the manager might be using it, but in the actual contract, the user has to use it, for example, right? Then the payments or the contract would be structured that till the user is comfortable with so and so. There is also deployment time, right? So the deployment time could be used as a phase where I, as a pre-sales solution architect, will sit with the user and say, oh, this is how the product has to be used, kind of thing, right? Then the user can give feedback, I'm not comfortable with it, but the contract is not signed till then. So you still have that leeway till then, kind of thing, right? So then, there is always a way out, kind of thing, if you're not comfortable using the product.
I think this also makes like the whole sales process of a SaaS company difficult. I mean,
Yes,
there's only so
longer.
much.
Yeah.
There's only so much like you can ask people to like take time off or integrate. Like you can't ask like a employee to keep using products once every month or once every month. They have to make that decision quickly.
Correct. If it's not adding value, then why would they use it, kind of thing?
Right.
So that comes back to our earlier question on you have to build something that becomes so core to the enterprise or to a mid-market or to SMB that they will find it very difficult to function without your product, kind of thing, right? Then you're not really talking about, hey, one user is not using it or something. You're talking about, hey, I'm using 5 of my users are using it. I want to scale it to 50 over the next 3 years. Let's talk about a roadmap together, kind of thing, right? So you have to become essential within the enterprise DNA, kind of thing,
Correct.
across multiple workflows. So coming back to that point, you have to become that till you become pervasive or universal, kind of.
Yeah, in the sense that I feel like this is not like a sector where essentially like the best product might win. In the
That's
sense
right.
that like the new product has to be so good or so
Drastically different. Yeah.
that not adopting the product like results in like proportional decrease in like revenue.
Value,
or something.
exactly.
Or else like if the product is like maybe 10%, 20% better.
Other elements come
Yeah.
to help you, kind of customer support, joint marketing campaigns, all those kinds of things, right? Are you able to get value across multiple domains and not only the product? Then you will go with that particular company to buy your software.
Correct, understood. Another term that I kind of came across while researching for this is ICP,
Yeah.
Which is ideal customer profile.
Yes.
So I have no idea what this is and like why is it important?
Yeah, so I think this comes back to a little bit that we touched upon earlier on who's your customer, kind of thing, right? Who's your customer segment? So within a large customer, let's say a Fortune 500 customer, like a Microsoft kind of thing, right? They will have certain different needs as compared to a mid-size customer kind of thing, right? They might need something that will automate some of their existing tools that they already have in place, kind of thing. It could be improving their developer productivity. It could be something around, improving or adding automation to their processes that they run, from sales to marketing to IT to ops and so on and so forth, right? So the knowing who your end customer is crucial in terms of what you're building. So the first step is actually figuring out who your target market is and what you're going to build for that target market, kind of thing. So that's why the term ideal customer profile, kind of thing, right? And if you're building for a small to mid-sized business, 5 employees, 10 employees kind of thing, right? They might require many more things than just process automation. They might not have processes itself. They might need something to actually move data from one system to the other seamlessly with some analytics on top, kind of thing, right? So their use cases might be completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you build your architecture of your product will be completely different depending on your ICP, kind of thing, right? So as you try and establish PMF, knowing your ICP becomes extremely important. Otherwise, you might have selling something to enterprise, something to mid-market, something else to, so you will never get to PMF, or your PMF will take a lot of time, kind of thing.
This has to be considered during the product development.
Exactly. In product development, know your ICP, get feedback, incorporate, iterate, and then kind of roll it out, kind of thing.
Anything else I might have forgotten?
No, I think
We've done.
we've covered the whole gambit, kind of thing, so we're good.
Sure, right?
Yeah, sure. I think it's good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was great fun. Yeah.